grant contract between Mesa County government and the U.S. Department of Justice in the amount of $20,546 for the replacement of outdated tasers for the year 2016 and authorize the chair to sign. We have Debbie Murray from Mesa County Sheriff's Office here to present this item. Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, so first of all, before we applied for this grant, we had brought this before the board. This is the JAG formula grant, which we get every year. At one time, several years back, we were with the city, but there's a formula to determine if we are by ourselves or with the city. They also calculate the amount that we're going to get. And basically, then we just have to go through the hoops in order to get this grant. And of course, there's only certain things we can, apply for with this grant. So this is our third year in a row we have gone for our tasers. And the reason why we have chosen the tasers is that the current ones that we had, they're no longer supported. So we don't have any warranties, and they had changed, they had changed it all. So we've been trying to get that all updated and found that this was a very good grant to be able to do this.
Thank you, Debbie. Kevin, you brought this forward. Would you please come on up to the mic and introduce yourself for the record and then talk about your concerns, please?
Good morning. Kevin King, Mesa County. I caught this over the weekend, so as you guys know, in the past I try to do a little due diligence prior to coming and speaking, and this particular grant has 50 special federal considerations or conditions that come with it. And I'll highlight ones that I think are disturbing or ones that should at least be considered before you make a vote today for such a small grant and probably what it's going to cost future generations. And also, for the record, since nobody else is here today, I don't know if you guys ever considered moving these to a Saturday or off hours where the public can actually attend. I know you make it accessible via online, but a lot of people work for a living here and have to, probably 2, 3, 4 jobs these days, but just something to consider. I'm just throwing that out there. The other thing I'd like is to request in future for these grants, I only get pieces of the information that's required in these grants on the Mesa County website. So I can go through and maybe explain to you what specific documents would help in seeing what this little $20,000 grant really cost the Mesa County citizens. So the ones that stood out to me were there's trainings that are required by the point of contacts in all financial points of contact.
What number in the grant?
Number 3.
Okay.
On page 6, at least with the downloadable part of it there. Required training for point of contact in all financial point of contacts. So that would be sort of the documentation I would want to see in maybe on the website accessible to see if that's been trained, because that's an automatic disqualifier if that hasn't been accomplished.
Okay.
Second was any duplicate federal funding, number 5. Has that been checked? So maybe we can determine that. That's a question, so mark that one down, a question. Then the one that's really painful in reading through it as you dig deeper into this grant is the partnership with faith-based and other neighborhood organizations.
What number was that one?
That one is number 16. And here's where I think it's going to get a little sticky is you get a group like Black Lives Matter or some sort of activist group in the community that's against something. Now there can't be any discrimination, or at least there has to be some sort of compliance to that. I think us stepping beyond that with the other grants that we're seeing coming through and other avenues, although this one has a taste of it here with NEPA, I think what we're going to start seeing is potentially with Mesa County being predominantly a white community, 93% I think were the latest statistics I looked at this morning. We're on the map by the federal government as probably the ideal community as being low income and predominantly white. But my biggest concern is on the faith-based side of this is, and you're starting to hear about it a little bit, and I think you're seeing consensus in the national community of this Sharia law potentially being enacted in neighborhoods or in communities. And so I think, and I don't know that I'm really even stretching that, because I think it's a reality in today's world that that would be a group of folks that begin to ask for special rights like all these other conditions are. At the end of the day, they're special rights for certain people. And so that one is really, I think, ultimately for me, I would ask, if we took this grant, I would ask the commissioners then to maybe provide an ordinance maybe to the citizens against enacting Sharia law ever. I mean, I don't think that's out of the...
I think Montrose may have done something like that. There's one county that did something along those lines. I'd have to look it up, but and I think it was in a reaction to a federal grant, something like this. I'll do a little bit more research on that, but
Okay.
I don't know that that's too far off as far as
Okay.
what counties are doing.
So I'm not completely off my rocker there.
I don't think so. Like I said, I have to check my research, but I'm pretty sure there was a county who did it based on something pretty much along the same lines of what you're talking about.
Okay. When you actually dig into some of you like dig into the websites that the grants direct you to, there's more than 50 compliances at the end of the day that are special requirements. There's another 100 to 200 behind it, and so when you go search those, there's a couple that stand out. One is, does the county have a porn blocking software package? So maybe you can answer that question as well. The other one is, we have law enforcement community taking these Taser grants, and in the same note, and I'll find that one, it's a no text messaging while driving federal regulation. And so to me it seems pretty oxymoron there, that because I'm sure they do that all the time with their in computers inside their patrol cars and everything. So
It's
I would
interesting.
see if that's been addressed.
So that language is in every single grant, MOU, anything that comes from the feds, because I was looking at an MOU just recently on the Manti LaSalle. We were asking for cooperating agency status, and that language was in there. And I wrote a note, actually, to County Attorney Coleman saying, what does this have to do with this agreement? But apparently it's required in every federal document.
Oh yeah, the airport one just a couple weeks ago. And so that has to be in there. So what happens if, what's the cost then if a Mesa County employee or airport employee wrecks a vehicle while texting? I know there's government immunity, but...
They will be fired. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Pat.
Well, wait a second. I don't quite agree with that. I looked that up because I saw a car weaving and they're texting on their computer. It's a law enforcement. And some time ago, and there was an exception in there for law enforcement activities or government, so they accept themselves out. So I think that if you read further, and I wasn't prepared for this morning, so this particular thing, I did read the requirements. But
so there is a
I believe
provision
you
in there,
can find an
operating
exception,
procedures
so
that, I don't know if maybe she can answer
I'm not
that.
sure I'd call operating procedure, but there is an exception that allows for the use of law enforcement or other authorized use. It's kind of like when you cross the interstate on those crossings, it's the only authorized vehicles. They give themselves exceptions, so there was an exception in there, I think.
Okay, perfect. The other one, when you dig, it's not specifically listed on the grant document that you provided on the website. It's actually on the under number 1. And if you go to that website or to that link, actually, hold on, not that one. Oh, sorry, I'm not to number 1 yet. Yeah, when you go to the 200 uniform requirements, when you go to that link and you look at those and you read down the list, I think it's down about number 38 from what I'd have to look it up. I don't have it prepared at the moment, but I did. This was another one that's really concerning to me and hopefully to you. It requires every MOU that Mesa County, as the grantee, sub-grantee, to be approved by the federal government. So
MOU with another federal agency, or
it just
every
says
MOU?
any MOU. It doesn't specify any federal MOU. So again, like I said, it threw up a red flag for me, just the way it read. And so I would ask, are there any MOUs associated with this grant that have to be in place? And okay. So anyway, I guess if they do one, it has to be approved by the federal government, not by Mesa County Commissioners. So one to look at. I can send that link to you if you'd like, so you can look at that.
Well, I'll ask the county attorney to take a look at that and make sure that, to be honest with, well, no, that's not true. I was going to say, to be honest with you, majority of our MOUs are with federal government or federal agencies, but that's not true because, well, I don't know. We have intergovernmental agency agreements, which would be different from an MOU. So like with the city for snow removal or something like that. So I don't know if we have any MOUs that are outside of federal, but I don't know. We'd have to take a look at that.
So it's only dealing with this grant?
Well, it's not what, I'll ask you to look at the 200 requirements and look at the MOU language specifically there. The other one that's on there is some sort of task force that's required. And let me get that number for you, just so you guys can get to it. Sorry, I thought about this morning while I was writing these down to get to them quicker.
No, you're fine.
But I brought my laptop, so. And so it's only certain people on this task force. And if you go look at it, it's really interesting. You can't, as a public person, private person, you can't even get into the website. It's only specific. And then the way it reads on there is, there it is, so number 31. 120 days within the award acceptance, each current member of a law enforcement task force funded with these funds, who is a task force commander. So I'd want some, what kind of task force is this? Is it a federal task force, since it's a federal grant? Agency executive, task force officer, or other task force member or equivalent rank will complete required online internet-based task force training.
Well, Kevin, I'll stop you there. So, I mean, this is for tasers only, so I don't see that there would be a task force in which the funds are used to do anything. I mean, it's really just funding an object. It's not funding a program. Does that make sense? So I think this is probably general language that's in every grant, but is not specific to this grant because it doesn't make sense otherwise. Don't you agree, County Attorney Coleman?
Yes.
It would, until you read down further where you have to participate in all B number 32, right below it. You have to participate in these sponsored training events, technical assistance events, or conferences held by BGA or its designees upon their request. And then it goes on to further expand upon expenses related to that. If they're used, you have to report all those. And so it just seems to me it's another requirement, another cost associated with the grant that the $20,000 would even potentially cover, which is my overall what is the true cost of this grant, because now when we get into the NEPA part of it, it almost seems like it, benefits individuals like George Soros, and folks like that are legislating these events from New York City and Washington, D.C. and little old Grand Junction, Colorado. So those are my questions, and would ask you to maybe do a little bit more research or supply those documents.
Commissioner McGinnis.
So I have a couple of questions. First, with the Sheriff's Department. Has the Sheriff's Department read each of these conditions?
I believe so. As far as the last one he was talking about, I believe that deals with our drug task force, and this money does not go to the drug task force. It's for tasers, and you were correct. So it would not, that one would not apply to us for this grant. As far as the other training, it actually basically applies to me, and I have taken training before and will continue to take training to make sure, and that's mainly to make sure that I know how to do the reporting. So I will continue that. And then there was another one, and I forget what it is. I think it was the second.
I guess my point being, I think it is appropriate. First of all, I think in different times, Mr. King may not be, the credibility of these issues may say, well, this is just standard government stuff, but things have changed dramatically. And I think the points Mr. King brings up are particularly pertinent. And so I'd ask the Sheriff's Department just to, if you wouldn't mind, just let us know that you've read, understood each of them.
Actually, I did read, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I did go through and read each one of them.
Let me finish, please.
Okay.
So all I want is just that each of these, you've heard these questions. I'm not expecting you to try and answer them today, but it would be helpful for me in the future, since we're going to see this language more and more, especially other neighborhood organizations and things like that, that the Sheriff's Department or whatever department, I'm going to ask this of other departments too, they understand what that is and they can provide explanations for us. Or you may find this is something that is brought to our attention, or now that we read it, Mr. King's point's correct, and we're not willing to comply with that. And actually, on a grant of this size, that's something you get a little more discretion because it's only $20,000. So that'd be my question or my request.
Okay.
And then to Mr. King, if I might. First, on the Sharia law, there's legal provisions. You can't come in and create a new law. Now, they can have a club and rules within their club, but those any kind of rules are prevented even by municipal law. You can't have a club organized down here and says, we're going to install our own speed limit signs in town and things like that. So I feel very comfortable about that. I think your points are excellent in regards, especially that language, other neighborhood organizations. And we're going to see a lot more of this that, in my opinion, is being driven by organizations like Black Lives Matter. And I think the current administration will, in the last 2 or 3 months of its service, I think you're going to see a lot of this language, not necessarily packed in from the top down. In other words, I don't think the president himself is packing this in, but especially if they lose the election in November, you'll see a lot of bureaucracies that aren't under the current administration, and it would apply to Democrat or Republican, so I'm not being partisan here. What will happen is they're going to jam all this kind of stuff they can possibly get in under the fear that they won't have the White House again for at least 4 years, but maybe even 8 years. So I think it's particularly important that we start to keep a very close eye on what's added on or what's been added on, especially in regards to the turmoil, without taking sides. Although I would in certain cases, but for the purpose of today's discussion, without taking sides, the turmoil our country's experienced, especially in law enforcement, they're loading us up with language, I think, that would be unfavorable to the viewpoints of the people of this community. But nonetheless, we need to be aware of it, and so to that extent, I think you're providing a service here. And other neighborhood organizations is exactly the kind of language, and apparently that's pretty new language because they retitle it now, the language under it. And of all the things I read in preparation for this meeting, that stood out more than anything else. Is this now this obligation that, and also special preference, I guess, to people that don't speak English well.
Correct.
I can't believe that's come into this thing. Anyway, it goes on and on. So, Sheriff's Department, thank you very much. I'm generally supportive, but I think Mr. King's brought up some valid points, and I think for the board, I think in the future, we ought to have all our departments make darn sure before they come in front of us, they've read this language and they can go through that with us. Since we don't have time on these grants and all that, I think it'd be helpful because there has been a dramatic change in the use of executive power in this language. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think along those lines, what I'm going to ask is that going forward, the County Attorney's Office flag these in advance of a Monday hearing and that we discuss these at a briefing so that we can get all the information before we're in public hearing and have to continue to potentially delay items. I will say the one provision that I really have issue with is the one regarding NEPA, especially when it comes to habitat for endangered species, all sorts of processes in which our county board is currently engaged and potentially adversarial with the federal government. Now, the reason I wouldn't necessarily hold up this grant is because it says that these funds would have to be used directly towards some sort of NEPA process, and that's not happening here. I mean, it's just tasers. However, having that language in there is very concerning to me because we are adversarial with the federal government on these issues. So,
can I interject here?
Yeah,
real quick?
I mean,
because if you go, I know exactly what page you're on. Like if you go
It's number
page
34.
17 of 18 is a specific letter, and the last time they took this Taser grant, it had this exact same letter with this NEPA environmental justice portion of it, and if you look at how that's changed over the years in the executive order, it's become this minority, low-income, specific. Driven language, and if you look at the bottom of the letter, it says right there, please be sure to carefully review the grant conditions on your award document. It may contain more specific information about environmental compliance. So there's the due diligence part that you guys are Commissioner McGinnis is speaking of that would like to see done on all these from now on, because they're going to
I agree.
sneak through some crazy stuff, and I think it relates specifically to AFFH that we've been having that discussion, and I've looked into that, and that is some scary stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Justman.
I think we need to work with CCI and NACO on this. It's not just Mesa County, it's across the whole country, and we can't be the only ones that have concerns with these particular items, and may just have to work with NACO directly. But I would think CCI can work through the two of them, and it's not going to happen overnight, obviously, but we might get some traction across the country to change some of these requirements that are a little bit out there.
Commissioner McGinnis.
If you don't mind, just because this is being televised, just kind of explain what CCI is.
Colorado.
Because I think your point is spot on. We don't have the resources, but on that basis, they do. But if you wouldn't mind.
Colorado Counties is an organization that almost all the counties belong to. You have membership. It's a lobbying group in Denver and in the state of Colorado, but they're also, by being a member of CCI, we're a member of NACO, National Association of Counties, and they lobby for a wide range of things. And this, being from the West, some of the things that they really work on really don't pertain to us nearly as much, but there's a lot of things they do work on that pertain to us. And it's just like the Western Interstate region is the 17 Western states that. When you go to their meetings and stuff, they talk about Western issues, and when I've attended those, it's always amazing to me how it's not just Mesa County, Colorado that has these thoughts. It is almost all the states, like Northern California, thinks very much like Western Colorado. That was a shocker to me. And you talk to the Utahs and the Idahos and the Montanas and Nevadas. They have the public land issues the exact same thing as we do, other than it's more about grazing or logging rather than oil and gas. And I was at a meeting that one time, and this group, they had a name for themselves, the Northern Colorado Counties, or California counties, wanted to do the same thing Weld County was talking about. And we think about California, we think of far to the left ideology, but you get to Northern California, it's like Mesa County. And the same thing in Oregon. Eastern Oregon is like Western Colorado. And you get to Western Oregon, and you have the Portlands, which portray the image of what they want. But in Idaho is a different animal, because I don't know how Boise would be. That may be more liberal, but their concerns are very similar to ours. Other in those states, a lot of it's logging and forestry rather than oil and gas.
Okay.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. I did research that National Association of Counties or whatever. I've researched them and looked a little bit deeper and found some documentation that they're not maybe the friends we think they are. So I would urge a little caution there as well. And there was some documentation that was just completely against what's going on out west here. A little disturbing when I came across it, but I know I can find it again, and I'd be happy to share it.
Please do, because that would be really interesting.
And I think one of the things here with these federal grants, I mean, Douglas County, coming regarding those AFFH grants, they said no. And I mean, that's a pretty large county, and that was probably several $1 million they just said no to in their community. So we're talking $20,000 here because of all the special conditions, and there's 50 mentioned here, but they go much deeper. So I would just...
I'd like to just point out one thing, Kevin, and of course, the whole thing's based on, I think the most powerful word in the world is leverage. Douglas County has a lot more leverage because they're one of the fastest growing countries in the
Counties.
U.S. counties, thank you. And so just a little note, since our county is not doing quite as well, we don't have quite the leverage Douglas County does. But the point's well received.
Yeah, and I mean, and to that point,
What
where are we in this predicament today because of all the past grants we've taken? Because we don't really have a financial analysis snapshot to say we got to hire 10 more county workers just for all the stupid paperwork that comes along with these things, and to make sure we're complying, and you know, a really nice rosy, 2015 to 17 healthy Mesa County, you know, it's all part of that's actually related to the NEPA. Believe it or not, it's all related. So what is that? What are we spending to give us nice statistics that show us that we are really not doing well as a county overall? But what caused that? What created it? Has it been these, you know, 20, 30, 40 years of social injection by a, you know, big federal overlord? And I know that sounds crazy, but I mean, when I do my homework, that's the only point I can face it to, and then I get no special rights against special victim right against a huge federal overlord, or I'll call her nanny, interfering with my life. I have no special privileges allotted to me other than to get to speak before you guys.
That is a special privilege. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, well, we really appreciate all of the different things that you have pointed out to us. I'm going to see if there's anyone else in the audience that wants to comment on this item, and then we'll bring it back here for board discussion. Thank you, Debbie, for being here as well. Anyone in the audience? No? Okay. All right, so board discussion, I'm going to start with Commissioner McGinnis.
We've had a good discussion, I think, with one hearing from the Sheriff's Department. It appears to me that the Sheriff's Department is in support of this. The Sheriff's Department has represented to us that they have read the conditions, and the Department's willing to live with those conditions and has an understanding of those. I do think it's important that the boards going forth tell the various departments, as previously recommended, that be prepared to come in here explaining those and have a clear understanding. You know, Kit at the airport was a good example. When he came in, because he has so much experience dealing with these grants, he provided a lot of information for us, and he understood what the implications and what the reality of it was and would apply. So if we could get trying to get a, and it's not that I'm trying to put an additional burden on our department heads. It's, we don't have any choice. And really, our calculation to Mr. King is pretty simple, money in and money out to determine the stability of the finance of the county. But money in has a lot of these connections, and now we're finding even money we spend, especially in public lands. So I think the points by Mr. King were valid. We're going to see a lot more of it in the future. We have to pay a lot more attention, and I think Commissioner Justman's comments in regards to Colorado counties and NACO, and I do agree, Mr. King, with NACO, but it's like any other organization. It's a national organization of all the counties, and they all get votes, and it's kind of like showing up in Denver from the Western Slope. We don't have, most of the time, they don't do what we primarily would like in rural Colorado versus urban, and it's more that than it is Republican, Democrat. It's more urban, rural, at least it's state legislative view. So, but it's still a national organization. They still have resources, and even communities that are more urban than ours or whatever, they're going to get stuck with these things too. So I think that Commissioner Justman's recommendations were spot on. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner McGinnis. Commissioner Justman.
I don't have, other than when you read this line up here, it says on number 34, the grantee agrees to assist the BIA in complying with the NEPA and the National Historic Preservation, blah, blah, blah. But in the requirements, in the use of these fund grants, either directly by the grantee or the sub-grantee. So does that mean if they're out there using their tasers, we're subject to it? If they're not using the tasers, we're not subject? It says in using the money of this grant, so I don't know. That's just one of my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Justman. Yes, I agree. Thank you, Kevin, for bringing these issues. You have a good expertise in delving into the federal requirements, and I think in every grant we've got to really assess, and especially going forward, because now that these are coming more and more to us, we really need to assess what strings are attached and the costs of those strings in relationship to the grant. In a lot of these, I feel a little bit more comfortable because it's tasers, and the language seems to say, now whether or not we're held to a different standard, I'm not sure, but the language seems to say, in relation to this particular use. Because like I said, that NEPA language, could put the county in a really bad spot on some things that we've been working really hard on as far as pushback on federal government. But we don't use tasers to do it. So I guess I'm feeling okay about this particular grant because of that. However, I did say on the record that going forward, I don't want to have these analyses in public hearing. I want to do them before, so that we can have better discussions and get the information that we need so that we can make better decisions. So, but I do appreciate you being here today and bringing these issues forward. So with that, I close public comment, but just come on up really quick.
Yeah, I forgot to, I was going to give you an example. I have a local blog here that has a whistleblower section on it. And when we're talking about these NEPA grants, and specifically about the AFFH a couple weeks ago, this came through a few months ago. I didn't do anything with it because it scared me to death. But it was related to an individual that had moved into town and set up a business through the incubator, had gone through the HUD housing portion of it, and started filing complaint after complaint after complaint. So I have these packages of emails of complaints, and immediately there was talk of a settlement issue, and I'm just, so this is what concerned me as a taxpayer. This person told me in a meeting that he would settle for nothing less than $25 million for his being, I guess whatever the terms are used there, discriminated against. That, all it's going to take is a few more of these organizations to send folks like that flood into Mesa County, and we're in some very serious trouble. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, with that, I would entertain a motion.
Moved.
Is the motion to approve?
Yes.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thanks again, Kevin. We appreciate it.